you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. When the Iron Lady sings it, that's when you know the show is officially on. Welcome to the big show, my family and friends. The Chris Voss Show, the family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law, because she never liked you anyway. She told me to say that, and she keeps DMing me, so I don't know what that's about. Anyway, guys, be sure to further show your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the tickety-tockety, and Chris Voss, facebook.com. As always, we have people that come on the show. They share their lifelong stories, the stories that they put hundreds of hours into, sometimes multiple lifetimes into, depending upon which Hollywood star you talk to. And they share their journeys. As we always like to say on the Chris Voss Show, stories are the owner's manual to life. We have another young lady on here to share her life story and how she's changed and recovered and turned her life into something new that's going places. So we have Allison Doss on the show with us today. She's gone from rock bottom to radiant and letting go like a boss. For her biography that she sent me, it starts out with this line: there's got to be a message in the mess, which is, I think that's the story of my life too, and most people's lives, really, when it comes down to it. At least that's what Allison Doss believes. Having overcome decades of addiction with a landmine of rock bottoms, her healing through a lifetime of trauma is inspiring others with resilience, strength, and hope. And just when she thought it was smooth sailing, her husband comes out as transgender. Nothing forced Allison to surrender her will like the heartbreak of the expectations of her partner not being met. With willingness, compassion, and vulnerability, she shows up as authentically as they come. She shows up as authentically as they come. Welcome to the show, Allison. How are you?
I'm so good today. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. We certainly appreciate it. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
I have my current career hair page on Instagram at Boss Doss Hair, BOSSDOSS Hair. Okay. And on TikTok, it's The Real Boss Doss.
There you go. The Real Boss Doss. I should get one that says The Real Boss Voss. Anyway. That's for another day. So tell us, you're doing what now currently?
Currently writing a book, and the book came about, oh gosh, where do I begin? I'll be 48 next month, and I didn't get sober until I was 41 years old. So from 17 to 41, I was just out there, and when I got sober at 41, it was at the tail end of my lifestyle of drugs and alcohol. I was a party girl in New York City in the 90s, and it was the best time of my life. And if I could have continued being 23 for the rest of my days, I would have done it, because it was great. But that's not what happens. And life moved on, and I tried to keep the party going, but that's just not how it works. So that club girl who was just highfalutin in New York City with grams of coke in her pocket and a bottle of vodka. When it was fun in the 20s. But I found myself at the age of 40, I was homeless, and I was prostituting, and I was addicted to crack, and I had lost custody of my children. My friends had died, and I was just alone. And I couldn't understand how I had gotten there, but I wasn't willing to change it. I wasn't willing to change it. I didn't really know how to change it. So I didn't know what I was, I just wanted to keep getting high. And one day I was in a trap house, and one of the other girls out there, an addict just like me, lost her children just like me, she didn't want me there because I was, I was competition for her.
Wow.
And she jumped me and she cut my face. I have a nice big scar living here on my face now. And for the first time in my life, at the age of 41, I was fearful about what might happen to me.
Oh, wow.
No one, of all of the things I'd been through during my addiction and recklessness, nothing had ever put the fear of God in me like that did. I don't know if it was my vanity that was now compromised, but whatever it was, it caused me to look at things a different way. So I had the opportunity to go to treatment. And started doing that thing. And I went to treatment for like 3 months, and I thought they were just going to teach me how to smoke crack like a lady, and I could just do it on the weekends. But that's not how it worked. I was very disappointed with that, because when I finished treatment, I tried to do just that. I'm like, oh, well, they've just taught me how to manage it. But that wasn't the case. Relapsed really hard, went back into treatment. And when I got out of treatment the second time, I really devoted an entire year to learning how to live with integrity, learning how to do the next right thing, learning how to be sober. And I was determined to follow the women around that had come before me that knew how to do this. But I met a guy a couple of months later. And instead of doing that, I decided to follow him around.
Wow.
I decided to follow him around and became obsessed with this guy at the age of 41. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm so in love. I have the feelings like I did when I was a teenager. And I thought it was really something real. And we ended up getting married a year later, and we moved to LA, and we were living this life. And just about 2.5 years ago, my husband told me that he thinks he may be transgender.
Holy crap. And you've been married for how long?
We had been married for a year, together for 6.
Oh, wow. For 6 years?
6 years.
And he decides after 6 years that he thinks he's transgender, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I would be lying if, let's not get it twisted. The word transgender never came into my mind, nor was it a part of any of our conversations, but there were behaviors along the way that were odd. We choked them up to being like, fetishes, perhaps. I did so much research. I was on Reddit looking at things like, is this normal? Is this real? Is this, I didn't know what was happening. He was 10 years younger than me and had a little bit of a different vocabulary than I did. There were words there were terms that he would use, like gender fluidity and gender fluid, and that stuff didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know what he was talking about. But there were things along the way that I just didn't quite understand what was going on. But the things felt uncomfortable to me, but I had been so strung out for so long, I didn't recognize what my body was telling me, because I was just so used to numbing out. I knew something was uncomfortable, but I didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
But so as I refer to my husband as he and husband when I talk about our relationship and our marriage.
Yeah.
But out of respect for the reality of the situation and how it is, I do refer to her since the transition.
Wow.
And that has been a really hard thing to do, because my reality, that's not the reality. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, you're trying to understand what's going on in someone else's head, and only they can understand what's going on in their head. So are you still married? Did you get divorced?
We just got divorced about 4 or 5 months ago. Believe it or not, when the information came to me, I think I'm transgender, my body began to tremble in such a way that I couldn't control it from the inside out. I didn't know what to do with that information, but my body was registering it in an uncomfortable, vibrating way, and I couldn't control it. I didn't know what to do with it. I was angry. I was vile. I was shameful. I was manipulative. I tried everything I could to make whatever was happening that was causing me to feel that way to stop.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't make it stop, the alcoholic that I am, I began drinking
Oh
again.
no.
I began drinking again. And for me, my drug of choice is crack.
Wow.
So I immediately, after a few weeks of drinking wine with my steak, ended up at the bodega getting drugs from a
Wow.
dealer. And it had been years since I had had a drink, years since I had done anything like that. I had built a career as a hairstylist. I was married. I was jet setting from LA to South Florida. I was living the life.
Hmm.
And in a matter of 3 months, I was kicked out of the HOA for, for disturbing and dysfunctional behaviors. And I'm like, here I go again. I mean, it's been so long since I've been here. What's happening?
Hmm.
So I had two choices. I could continue to the bitter ends, jails, institutions, and death, which I've been to jails. I've done all that. But it just didn't make sense to me to think that I was destroying my life because my partner is brave enough to attempt to live their authentic self. So I had to come to some type of surrender and decision for what was really happening and what was I going to do about
Hmm.
myself in that matter. So I was still struggling with that trembling uncomfortability I couldn't make go away for any reason. I couldn't make it go away at all. But
Hmm.
and when my solution of drinking and drugs was taken away, it started getting worse. So I began to think that if I could just heal myself enough to be at peace with what was happening, perhaps it would go away. So I had this motive that something that I could heal myself enough to be with the new person. Because at the time, my partner still looked like my husband, but was proclaiming to be someone else. I was in such a denial about what was happening because it just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, my partner still wants to be with me and I really want to be with them. So why are we separate and why am I hurting? So I'll just heal myself enough to make this feeling go away and we can be together. So
Mm.
I went on this journey of like every healing modality you could possibly imagine, from inner child workshops, dissecting the fabric of my own cloth, hypnotherapy, all kinds of modalities to try to make that feeling go away, that feeling of me not wanting what was happening to be happening.
Ah.
And I thought something was wrong with me, and maybe I wasn't evolved enough to actually love my partner for their soul. Because we have this whole generation that is like that. There's a newer generation that's coming up where they love each other for their soul, and they're different versions of the LGBTQ community. And I was catching a lot of flack from some of my younger friends for not being able to love my husband for their soul. But then my generation, the older generation, was all like, I can't believe you're even trying to tolerate this in your life. So I was being tugged in a
Yeah.
bunch of different directions. I didn't know what to do. All I want to do is I want to feel better.
Yeah. Well, you can still love people for the soul. You don't have to be married to them. Yeah.
Well, I couldn't make sense of
I
it.
love all my exes for their soul, but I'm not letting them move in again.
I couldn't make
They're
sense of
wonderful.
it. There wasn't any support for me in the LGBTQ community. I tried to go to support groups. I tried to find other women like me that were going through what I was going through. I couldn't find anybody except Chris Jenner and me. And I'm like, how am I going to get in touch with her so we can like talk about this?
Oh, yeah, I get it now. I was
You know,
trying to put that two together for a second, but yeah, I got it.
she's the only one that I knew of that was going through this or had gone through it
I'm
recently.
sure she saw warning signs too.
You
Evidently, there were a lot of warning signs. Evidently, from what I heard, but yeah. So you finally find, you feel like you go through a rough your 20s. You get addicted to stuff. You feel like you're on the right path. You're getting a man in your life. You're starting to do all the things society's like, hey, if you do all these things, you check the
yeah,
boxes on being a good citizen or whatever the hell. And then you find out that you got issues in your relationship, and it's destabilizing you and putting you back into wanting to become an addict again. So where do you go from there?
well, I knew where to go to get help. I had a lot of support in the town that I live in. I had left LA and moved back to South Florida where we had
Hmm.
lived previously. And I got my footing back into AA and started, working a program and doing that, living with spiritual principles and working with other women. And for me, that's been what has, kept me sober thus far. But the biggest thing about, like, when I decided to write the book, which is why I started the story of, like, why did I even write this book, is because, like, I finally discovered that the transformation and the transition that happened with my husband was like, it catapulted me to have like a huge transformation of my own. I really began to investigate how I had shown up in the relationship and how I had been showing up in life with like massive amounts of the need to control and trying to manipulate the outcome and expecting people to behave the way that I want them to. I mean, Chris, I have Boss Doss tattooed on my knuckles. Like, this is how I've lived in my life, thinking that everyone's supposed to just do what I want them to do.
When did you get those put on your knuckles?
When I was, this was 7 years ago.
Wow.
Is the same year that I got my throat tattoo done. When I got off the street and I started getting into this sober world, I was still my identity, I wanted people to look at me like I was a street tough chick. I know I don't look like it now, but I kind of used to.
Yeah.
And so I was navigating this new world of integrity and living with people in the real world, but I didn't want anyone to not know exactly where I had been. And I showed up with that. I went and got my throat done. I got my knuckles done because the gangsters always had their throats, their knuckles and their neck done. And that's how you recognize that they were such. And I wanted to be seen as otherworldly and vaguely threatening.
Defense mechanism, if it were. How did you grow up? Did you have a father in your life who was a good man who set you straight? And what happened?
My dad, my mom and dad married since they were 15 years old. I'm from a very farm town in Duboc, Louisiana, in North Louisiana under Arkansas. And my mom, my dad, my brother and sister, we were all in the same house. My dad was quite authoritarian and demonstrative and would punch holes in the walls if we didn't listen. My older brother and sister were very passive children, and I was always the one who was stirring shit up. Always getting in trouble. My dad was always whipping me with the belt. I was always doing things I wasn't supposed to. Don't know why.
Well, it sounds like there's some instability. I mean, if a man's punching holes in the wall, I mean, that sounds like some emotional instability and more feminine than masculine, really. So it sounds like there was maybe some instability there at the home. Probably maybe sent you in, because usually if a daughter is acting out, she's either not getting enough attention or whatever. So it's interesting to me. Have you ever sat down with a psychiatrist and talked about the patterns that you may have gotten from childhood or childhood traumas that led you down this road?
I'm not sure if I think I was born an addict. I think I was born.
Really?
I think I was born. I can just remember from my anxiety and my behaviors when I was a kid. I had to be a part of every team, the best of every team, the best of every play, the main character, the trophy winner. I had to be the winner. And I think that came from like not high performance by any means. I think it came from like a certain amount of anxiety that I carried with me. And that anxiety, of course, I had it at home because my dad was, somewhat explosive, but he was like, he has since passed, but my dad was always the coach of the softball teams. And I was like Donnie Dawson's daughter. People knew when I showed up, I was going to get shit done. And that was something that I really loved about my dad. And as much as I respected him, I feared him, but not enough to back down to him. So I thought that I was a little bit tougher than the next person because I was able to take his wrath.
Wow. That's interesting. So your journey now, you've divorced from your marriage. You've and so now you're doing hair. You're working on your book to tell your story. What's the future hold for you? And do you have a title for the new book?
I do. It's the working title is The Unbossing.
The Unbossing. I like it. I like it. I like it. You're gonna have to get 2 more fingers so you can, write unboss.
Right.
Maybe just put them on the thumbs, unboss or something.
It's just been a beautiful journey of surrendering to what is and not forcing my will into everyone's life.
There you go. Especially when you find, I'm not saying that you make a lot of bad decisions, but I think we can agree you might have made a few that you're not happy with. That you're not happy with. I'm not judging you. I've certainly done quite a few in my life that I'm not happy with. But there comes a time where you just go, whatever is causing me to make the choices that I'm making, I need to fix because I'm making horrible choices. And, it's kind of funny. I think you said you're 48 now. When I hit about 50, I could look back on my life and see how some of the traumas of my childhood were being dragged for 30 years into my life. And I could see the damage and wreckage. And sadly, you don't see it sometimes when you're doing it at the time, but you can look back and go, yeah, there's a mess back there. Did I do that? Oh, shit. That wasn't me. Oh, well, I should probably fix that. And so it's great that you're at that journey now because, it's better that you figure it out before it's too late. So, are you going to share some tips in your book of, how to fix yourself and how to get on the journey of straight and narrow? I'm sure a lot of people that have addiction problems and have gone through bottoms like you are looking for great stories to help them, and just knowing that they're not alone, that there's other people that have done it and gotten out.
Right. When I was going through the difficulty with my husband coming out, I couldn't find any support specifically for myself, but I did have a mountain of other types of support around me. And I specifically wanted to write the book for someone who doesn't have that type of mountain of support around them. If I was still living in Duboc, Louisiana, and was, going through what I was going through, there would have been no support for me. And so the book was specifically written for people to understand that it's okay to not have the capacity to respond to what you're going through. I didn't have the capacity to respond to what I was going through, and I was hateful and vile and shameful, but you don't have to live there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, dissecting how I had shown up in the relationship and how I was responsible for my own broken heart because of how I showed up for years in the relationship when there were red flags, blowing and screaming and slapping me in the face. But I thought that I could control it. I could handle it. I could love him enough to make it stop. All of those defects that devalued, that I felt like I had no value. But once you know, you can't unknow.
Yeah.
So that's where I sit now. I'm armed with the facts about myself, and I want to help others be armed with theirs. So we don't have to tolerate relationships. We can actually live and receive quality relationships in our lives.
Definitely. I mean, if you fix yourself, you're going to attract people that are fixed. If you're broken, you're going to attract people that are broken. Which, if you look at my roster of 30 years, no, I'm just kidding. I mean, I dated some wonderful women and we did our best, and it's a 50-50 game of who's at fault. But I did have my mother say to me one time, she says, "Why do you always pick these girls?" And that's when I realized that I had based my girlfriends on my mother. So there you go.
As what, looks or personality?
Toxicity, probably. I don't know. We didn't always have a great relationship growing up. But no, that's half a joke there. But there was my mom was blonde too, so I don't put that together where you want. And so I dated a lot of blondes for a long time. But I was broken. I was traumatized from childhood, and so I was attracting people who also were broken as well. And it was like, so you're sitting there as two people, and you're like, "Hey, you got some traumas?" "Yeah, I got some traumas. So I got this bag of broken glass, and you got what? A bag of razor blades? Let's fucking
Perfect.
play, right?"
I haven't dated since I left LA and left my husband 2.5 years ago, and I have this laundry list of questions to ask at a first date.
Do you? I mean, the best thing you're doing is what you're doing right now. You're healing yourself. You're finding yourself. you're rebuilding, kind of when you divorce, you have to rebuild your identity, because when you're
Yeah.
married, it's a different identity. And a lot of people, they really make the mistakes. I see this in the dating field where they get divorced, they break up out of a relationship, and then right away they want to start dating again. And it's like, even someone who's a serial dater like me, I see that. I'm just like, you're fucked up for a couple
Yeah.
years. You need to go deal with that, both men and women, because they have to unpack and grief and go through that whole cleansing process of getting the dead identity out of them, and they've got to rebuild who they are again, and they got to find out what makes them happy, and then hopefully you meet them somewhere in that cathartic cross, and you're like, hey, did you get all that shit cleaned up with the psychiatrist? And they're like, yeah, I did. And you're like, okay, well, maybe so. So there you go. But it sounds like you're doing that. Part of your pathway is writing this book. Part of your journey of cleansing yourself and figuring all this stuff out. They always say the teacher learns more than the student, and so that's the great thing about a book and sharing your story like you are. And I love how you're being authentic too. I mean, you're telling the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you're saying this is it, because people do need to hear it. There's the stories are the owner's manual of life, and there's so many people out there that may have gone through a situation or in a situation that you used to be in, that are trying to find the door, and you're probably the only voice that can bring that to them, to give them the key to open it.
That's exactly what I meant by that first sentence of, please God, let this mess be a message. Because if it's not, I just need to crawl in a dark corner, a dark hole, and just not come out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There you go.
A light.
How to go from rock bottom to a rock star. And I like how you have the attitude of letting go like a boss. I see so many people do this thing. I'm a boss babe now. I see it in dating pools, and men don't want to date another boss. We're not, being a boss and being a leader is masculine trait. We want a feminine trait. And so I'll see these women that are just like, I'm a boss babe. I'm a boss. And you're like, I don't really want a boss. I would like a nice feminine woman who is nurturing and kind. And, if I want to date another masculine person, I'll go on Grinder, date another man. And so I get why women do it, because it's, they're trying to be more masculine because they're in a masculine frame when you're in the work environment, leadership environment. But, in a relationship environment, it's a whole different thing. I don't really want to be competing with the boss babe over here, in my relationship.
And that had been my attitude.
Yeah.
My persona for so long, and it was exhausting to try to prove something.
It is, yeah.
Something. What is there? There's nothing to prove. There's a certain sense of peace and serenity that I don't need validation from anyone for anything, and that comes from unbossing yourself.
Yeah. I mean, like you talked about, you're doing the tattoos and different things to try and, show you were still street cred and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, really, most women want to get into their femininity, but they have to have a secure alpha frame around them to be able to provide that security, provider, protector sort of thing. And it's hard when women are single, because they have to be either the masculine as well. I mean, you're raising kids now still. Did you get your kids back?
Yes. Yeah. My oldest son, he's 22. He lives with me. My youngest son, he's 16. He was just here this weekend for the holiday. We have incredible relationships, but that is only because I suit up and I show up and I make sure that I am there. And it took years for me to rebuild those relationships and regain their trust. And now they're around me all the time. They trust me.
There you go. There you go.
I sometimes don't even feel like I deserve it for everything that they've been through, but they're remarkably resilient, and we adore each other.
There you go. And they probably love their mom. Most sons do, even if they're not the greatest moms in the world. I'm not saying you were, but
terrible.
No, I'm not referring to you. But I mean, I had a real toxic grandmother, so that's what's going through my head. I don't know how anybody dealt with her as a mother, but yeah, fortunately, I had a good grandmother on this side. But so now you're in a healthy state of mind. You're rebuilding yourself. You're taking care of yourself. you're getting out there, you're sharing stuff. Do you plan on maybe doing some coaching or something like that soon, where you coach people and help them?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm working on a digital course that I can offer, with the pre-sale of my book to just kind of see if there's any interest in anyone, having me help them with anything.
Hmm.
So yeah, transformational coaching. I've hired a global transformational speaking mentor that's helping
Oh.
me curate my signature speech. So I'm
Hmm.
working on that also. And I'm just super excited about the evolution of what's to come. And, when I get on my knees at night and pray, I
Hmm.
never in a million years thought I would be grateful for everything that has happened thus
Yeah.
far in my life. Without it, would I have purpose?
Hmm. Being grateful is one of the most important things. I think it really grounds you.
Yeah.
Where, I every Sunday I do gratitude Sunday. We call it Grateful Sunday. It's on my calendar. And so every day is on Saturday, on Sundays, it's my reflective time. It's my peace time. No one's allowed. There's no dates. There's no women of it's my Hugh Hefner used to have one day a week where he would do his journaling, his archives, and his library, and he would organize his life. He would have gratitude for his life. He'd go through this, he'd pretty much spend all of his time in his library. And so Sunday is my day where I eat alone. I have peace all day long. I start looking at my week and start getting that game in my head as to how that's going to go down, and whatever I got to do, trying to catch up to emails, but mostly gratitude. So I sit down, I go through old photos, I process, the photos of my dogs, which are my children, and, put them into the different, categories and backup files. We back up everything. And so that's my time to have gratitude. And I think gratitude really grounds people. I think
Mhm.
that's, I think it's maybe, isn't it one of the tenets of AA where you have to have gratitude?
You
Maybe.
gotta, yeah, in the beginning, the gratitude is the biggest exercise. It's an
Mhm.
action. It's not something that just comes naturally to just wake up in gratitude. It's an action, and it's something you have to practice in order for your mind to get set that way.
Mhm. Yeah.
For
And it helps. I think it helps keep you grounded. It helps you appreciate yourself, maybe love yourself a little bit more. I might love myself a little too much.
sure.
Um,
Yeah. There's
he's
this
a narcissist.
I feel you. There's this pattern that I've noticed in my older age. This is
Mm,
not something I could have recognized when I was 20 or 30, but everything that transpires and happens, there's this incredible hindsight blessing that I'm like, oh my God, that could never have happened if so and so didn't happen.
mhm.
If like, and the things that have happened are incredibly tragic and hurtful and traumatic. But if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be 2 years later looking back going, wow, if that hadn't happened, like, for example, if my husband hadn't come out as transgender and I hadn't moved back to Delray, my oldest son would not be living with me right now, which is
Oh, wow.
something I had begged and prayed God for years prior to even meeting that man.
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. And so, it's an interesting road. And the nice thing is about the other thing about gratitude is it helps you be present, I think, because you have to be in the present going, I appreciate everything that we've got right here. And I think that's important. But yeah, it, you have to be present and go, well, the past is the past. Whatever happened, it got me here. It's a weird, wacky journey of life, but at least you've entered salvation now. And so you've got a chance to redeem yourself, save yourself, find yourself, develop yourself, and you're out of the throes of addiction and hopefully, just making bad choices and stuff.
Yep.
And you like me have probably made a couple, I would say.
98% of my life has been a bad decision.
Well,
But I'm so excited about the next half of my life.
there you go.
I didn't know that when I began getting sober, I used to, complain to my family that my life's going to be boring now. Nothing's going to be exciting. Nothing, and it was just the crazy I was addicted to, the
Yep.
chaos,
Mhm.
constant chaos. And now that I don't have the chaos and I live in peace and my body feels at peace, when something rattles that, I'm like, whoa, whoa, I don't like that. I,
Yeah.
I I don't like that feeling of uneasiness anymore. And I'm so excited that I am grateful. I'm so excited that I I feel like an expansion happening. I don't know what it is, but it feels really good. And I
Mhm.
love that I have friends and relationships and my children are here. I'm so excited for the next half of my life.
It sounds like you built a much richer life, and you've got good support groups and people,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's a great lesson for people out there who might have gone through the same thing or going the same thing. Building a support group, having friends, and watching for the people. That's one of the challenges a lot of people do that are grow up in trauma or grow up in instability is they think that's normal, and so their whole life is unstable because they're like, well, that's what I grew up with. I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
And so it's good that you can acknowledge it. You can see it now coming. You can be like, well, okay, hey, what's going on here? And stay out of that whole sort of mess because you don't want to go down that road again. So give us your final thoughts as we go out and pitch to people. Where can they follow you, et cetera, where they get news on the upcoming book?
I'm finishing the edits of my book. It's called The Unbossing. It will
Hmm.
be for pre-sale and sale on Amazon.
Hmm.
You can find me at The Real Boss Doss on TikTok or Boss Doss Hair on Instagram. I am in South Florida. And if anyone needs to get their hair done, I do beautiful platinum work. I'm an international award-winning platinum hair artist.
Oh, wow.
God gifted me with that talent just off the streets. I don't know how that happened, but God is good.
There you go. There you go. Well, I'll call you when I want to go blonde again. I used to be blonde back in the 90s. So thank you very much for coming on the show, Allison. We really appreciate it. We got your .coms in there, right?
Yep.
There we go. And thanks, Monis, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Foss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Foss, Chris Foss one on the Tickety Talkety, Chris Foss Facebook.com, and I think that's everything. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.